Syd Barrett is one of the most enigmatic figures in all of music, and I say this because he not only had his own musical output, which was very promising at the time, but he went on to inspire some of the greatest music that has ever been created through affecting the album run of Pink Floyd during the 70s. They had this unbelievable album run, so much of which I have covered at this point, and he's a figure that keeps popping up. Different tracks, even you could say albums that have been inspired by the man. And so I wanted to learn more about his story, and particularly a story about him barging into a studio session for the album Wish You Were Here. So that's what I'm going to be here to find out about. It's going to be an educational video for myself. Hopefully you guys can take something away from it too. Hope you guys enjoy. Here we go. Here we go. This is Pink Floyd, Syd Barrett, and Wish You Were Here sessions. This is done by a YouTuber, so I'll link the original video down in the description. Here we go.
Video on my channel. Now, June 5th, 1975 would mark the day Pink Floyd would see their old bandmate and former ringleader Syd Barrett for the last time. Okay. Barrett crashed the band's recording session for their 9th album, Wish You Were Here. The band members were left both shocked and saddened by the encounter. What happened? Stay tuned to find out.
Okay, so this is exactly about as much as I understand. He was there for the album Wish You Were Here. Now, I've covered the album and I've understood that a lot of the tracks on there were at least partly inspired by the man. David Gilmour has said that Wish You Were Here is, for him, about Syd Barrett. He thinks about Syd whenever he plays the song. So I'm curious to find out whether or not it was before his entry into the studio session that they were inspired to write the music, or was it that they were making the music and he turned up? Because that would be pretty crazy. I mean, talk about destiny.
Syd Barrett, Pink Floyd's co-founder and the creative driving force behind their debut LP, 1967's The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, didn't leave.
Great name, by the way. Great name for an album.
On good terms with the band. Initially described as joyful, friendly, and extroverted, he began to experience personality changes, becoming increasingly depressed and socially withdrawn. His mental instability, his volatile on- and off-stage behavior, and crippling addiction to psychedelic drugs made him a liability to the band.
Wow.
Barrett had minimal involvement in the group's second LP, 1968's A Saucer Full of Secrets, but he was ultimately replaced by the time the album was finished.
Okay, so one of the things that I noticed when I look at Syd, so let's back this up a little bit. Maybe I'm doing a little bit of like, hindsight is 2020 type thing, but doesn't he strike you? I mean, this is a bad picture, but something strikes you about his eyes. I mean, certainly he looks like a very sensitive man for sure. Someone who I think belongs in creating art, but can you guys see it? Like possibly that something is taking part here. There's kind of sadness in his eyes, darkness, if you will, maybe that something is turning, something is happening behind the scenes that we're not aware of.
1968's A Saucer Full of Secrets, but he was ultimately replaced by the time the album was finished. And while the band wanted to keep him as a touring member, it became impractical and he was soon replaced by guitarist singer David Gilmour.
Okay, I didn't know that was exactly the story. Syd Barrett being replaced by David Gilmour. I mean, talk about the greatest substitution of all time.
His departure from Pink Floyd, Barrett would end up releasing 2 studio albums, both in 1970, titled The Madcap Laughs and Barrett. The members of Pink Floyd were so guilt-ridden with kicking Syd out of the band that they contributed to both solo records, with both albums being co-produced by David Gilmour. Wow. And featuring bassist Roger Waters and keyboardist Richard Wright, respectively.
Interesting.
Following the release of The Madcap Laughs, Barrett retreated from the spotlight. Late keyboardist Richard Wright reflected on the solo sessions with Syd Barrett, revealing, "Doing Syd's record was interesting but extremely difficult. Dave and Roger did the first one, The Madcap Laughs, and Dave and myself did the second one. But by then it was just trying to help Syd any way we could. Rather than worrying about getting the best guitar sound, you could forget about that. It was just going into the studio and trying to get him to sing," he'd remember.
Okay, that is really sad to hear, because in terms of the things that people have told me about Syd Barrett is that he was very promising as an artist himself. He was a great songwriter, at least the things that I've heard the most. He had this very quirky style of writing. I've even heard Roger Waters describe it. But I guess it can be chalked up to the fact that some people seem to have adverse reactions to taking strong psychedelic drugs. Like I've heard some people who have, what would be the word? Kind of smaller or innate form, or not innate, but subdued form of schizophrenia can then be aggravated through the use of psychedelic drugs. And that might have been the case here with Sid. They were saying he was addicted to taking psychedelics, and it might have just exacerbated what was there already.
Forward 5 years later, and Pink Floyd were working on their 9th studio record, Wish You Were Here. And two notable events occurred on June 5th, 1970. One event was David Gilmour was getting married, and the band was completing the final mix on the song Shine On You Crazy Diamond, which was a tribute to Syd Barrett.
What?
There was also a third notable event on this day, and that's when Pink Floyd got an unexpected visitor in the studio. An overweight man sporting shaved eyebrows and head, holding a plastic bag, walked into the studio. David Gilmour thought the man was a worker from the record label EMI, while the other members initially had no idea who he was.
That looks like a totally different person. That looks like the shell of Syd Barrett. I mean, the fact that he doesn't even have eyebrows is kind of troubling.
They realized it was their former bandmate Syd Barrett, and according to one report, Barrett held a toothbrush and attempted to brush his teeth by holding his brush still and jumping up and down. In Mason's memoir of Pink Floyd titled Inside Out, he recalled Barrett's conversation as not entirely sensible. And Storm Thorgerson, who was an English graphic designer and video director who worked with Pink Floyd, was present in the studio and later reflected on the conversation, saying, 2 or 3 people cried, he sat around and talked for a bit, but he wasn't really there. During their chat, Andrew King, who was Pink Floyd's co-manager, who was also present, asked Barrett how he gained so much weight, and Barrett reportedly said he had a big refrigerator in his kitchen and he had been eating lots of pork chops. And during the same conversation, Barrett...
I mean, one of the craziest aspects of this story is the fact that they were working on Shine On You Crazy Diamond and Syd Barrett walks in. I mean, if you were writing a movie and you had that as one of the scenes, you'd be like, come on, man, this is a bit unrealistic. You should make this more believable. Yeah, right, that would happen, right? The fallen or lost friend, band member that you've created your song about walks in as a shell of himself and inspires more music, or at least shakes up the band in this unbelievable way. They were saying that the band members, some of them were crying. Talk about destiny, you know? The idea like this man almost like lost himself in order to then give all this fantastic inspiration to the band is quite, it's sad, but almost beautiful at the same time, you know, like sacrificial.
Offered his services to the band, but when he listened to the mix of Shine On, he didn't seem to understand the song's connection to his tragic life. Waters asked Barrett what he thought of the song, and he simply said he did not like it and walked out of the studio. And during the visit, Barrett would also join guests at Gilmour's wedding reception in the EMI canteen, but he would leave without saying goodbye. This photograph snapped of Barrett is from that very day. Most of the band members wouldn't see Barrett again until his death in 2006, and Roger Waters would reveal to the Mirror newspaper in 2008 that he did have one final encounter with Barrett, revealing, "The last time I saw him was a couple of years after he turned up at the Wish You Were Here sessions. I bumped into him at a British department store named Harrods, where he used to go buy sweets, but we didn't speak. He sort of scuttled away." And Waters made no further attempt to try and communicate with his ex-bandmate. Waters would reflect back on Syd's contribution to the band in a 1975 interview, saying, "I'm very sad about Syd, though I wasn't for years. For years, I suppose he was a threat because of all the bollocks written about him and us.
Wow.
Of course, he was very important, and the band would never have started without him because he was writing all of the material. It couldn't have happened without him, but on the other hand, it couldn't have gone on with him. He may or may not be important in rock and roll anthology terms, but he's certainly not nearly as important as people say in terms of Pink Floyd, so I think I was threatened by him," he'd say. Barrett would end up dying of pancreatic cancer in 2006. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching.
Okay, wow, that was a fascinating listen. Firstly, fantastic video. I'll again link my man's video in the description, but the kind of biggest takeaway from this is this idea of like fate and destiny. Like the fact he turned up to the very studio session where they were mixing and finalizing the track that's dedicated to the man is just some strange, kind of act of the universe, if you ask me, man. That's unbelievable. It's almost like if you've ever had this happen, when you're thinking about a friend, randomly pops up in your mind, and then they call you. If that's ever happened to you, it's happened to me a ton of times. It's like that, but multiplied by 1,000. He turns up, kind of a shell of himself. He's trying to brush his teeth by jumping up and down, and all the band members are like, crying essentially by the sight of the dude. What a story, man. What a story. And as Waters was saying at the end, he's saying that, does Sid have a giant effect on rock music? He doesn't know. But at least to the band of Pink Floyd, he's a significant figure for sure. And as I was saying, it's almost like bittersweet. He almost had to sacrifice himself to give this band all this new inspiration, or this fantastic music that they made about him. And I don't know if they would have made it like that with him being there, especially the fact that David Gilmour replaces the guy after him losing his mind. What a story, man. What a story. Almost too good to be true, Like I was saying, in a movie, if they put it in, you'd be like, I don't know, man. You might want to switch the scene up a little bit more, make it more believable. Cool video. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and let me know if you want to see more like this, discovering sort of the stories behind the music. Catch you guys in the next one.